Folks, if you're just joining us, we're giving everyone a moment to sign in. Feel free to jump in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from this morning. We'll get started in just a second. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Preview Week for Willamette, the Pinot Noir auction. The 2019 Willamette Valley wines featured in this tasting series are exclusive small lot bottlings for our wine trade auction. If you don't know about the auction and you'd like to learn more about how to purchase these wines, contact Emily at the WVWA, and I dropped her email address in the chat. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our auction sponsors for their ongoing support. And a very big thank you to our Imperial sponsor, Winebow. And now I'd love to kick off our session by introducing our panelists. Representing lot 53, John Grochau, Grochau Cellars. Representing lot 54, Steve Anderson of Eola Hills Wine Cellars. Representing lot 55, Allison Sokol Blosser of Sokol Blosser Winery. Representing lot 56, Bryan Laing of Hazelfern Cellars. Representing lot 57, Maggie Harrison of Antica Terra. Representing lot 59, Alban Debeaulieu of Abbott Claim.
Hi.
Representing lot number 60, Arron Bell of Domaine, Drouhin, Oregon. And our moderator for today, Pat Dudley of Bethel Heights. Pat, they're all yours.
Thank you very much, Julia. It's going to be a great day in the Willamette Valley today, 99 degrees, my projection says, and 66 in the evening, so ideal weather for sure. Good thing we can go barefoot this morning on Zoom. I want to say thank you, Julia, for organizing all of this. It's been heroic. It's the second to the last day of Preview Week, and Julia's still smiling, which is great. I want to say this is the largest panel of the week. We have 7 lots to present today. So, and they're all really interesting. Great conversations possible here if we can manage to move it right along. We have an interesting diversity of AVAs in this group. We have 1 from the Dundee Hills, 2 from Yamhill Carlton, 2 from Eola Amity, and 1 with the Willamette Valley appellation, which is still the appellation that really counts in the outside world. And just in case you haven't already heard it several hundred times this week, Willamette Valley was just granted the protected geographical indication status for the European Union, which is a real big deal for us. And happy to have 1 lot in this panel that is going to be Willamette Valley appellation. We do have, okay, so I said 7 people, so we're going to move right along here. I'm going to ask each one in turn, we'll go in lot order, and ask each one to say a little bit about your winery, when it started, where it's located, and then talk about your lot, and then we'll keep moving and have hopefully time for some conversation, discussion, questions as we go along. So right into it. The first lot, number 53, John Grochau of Grochau Cellars, and it's called Metaphor and Simile. Take it away, John.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Yeah, so we are in Amity, Oregon, Grochau Cellars. We started in 2002. I started my winery after a long stint in the restaurant business, working in fine dining in both Portland and San Francisco. 14 years of waiting tables, bartending, and ultimately managing restaurants brought me into the wine business. I just really was compelled by wine and studied it obviously for sales purposes and my own interest. But I just really wanted to know how it was made. And because I was in Portland, I was able to volunteer in wineries. Those volunteering led to harvest internships, which led to jobs and ultimately me starting a winery. in 2002, and it was just one wine, a blend of multiple vineyards, and that's why we did a multiple vineyard blend for this first lot. We don't own a vineyard. We work with about 11 different vineyards, and we thought it'd be better to do a large blend rather than focusing on one of the many single vineyard wines we do make already. So we call it metaphor and simile because, well, it's kind of an esoteric little thing. It's a mix, so I was kind of riffing off the mixtape, and it was a name of a mixtape a good friend of mine made for me in the early 90s, and that's what he called it. He was studying poetry, so it's apropos to him. But it was still one of my favorite mixtapes, and I still have it. Yeah, so this wine is a blend of 4 vineyards, 3 of which are in the Eola Amity Hills, one of which is in the M Hill Carlton AVA. In the Eola Amity Hills, we have Bjornson Vineyard. From there, we get the 667 clone of Pinot Noir. It's actually a unique part of the vineyard. It's on the east side of the hills, so it has Jory soils rather than it's more common to Dundee Hills Jory soils. So it gives you a round, supple texture. We also have some Redford Weddell Farm Swan Clone Pinot Noir, which Swan Clone is a California clone. It's a selection from Joseph Swan Vineyards. So it's not very common in the Willamette Valley. It always produces a very, just a vibrant, crunchy berry fruit, almost like a cranberry meets pomegranate meets Italian plum. It's a really nice piece to the wine. Then we also have Vivid Vineyard, which is a younger site and a site I'm happy to say that we lease now in total. So we're very excited to actually get more control over our farming. And that's a little further north and higher elevation. And it's a mix of Pomard and Wadensville. And then lastly, we have Carlton Hill Vineyard in the M Hill Carlton AVA. This is a unique site from the rest because it's on sedimentary soils versus volcanic soils in the Eola Amity Hills. So here we have a little bit more of a darker berry fruit, almost in the black fruit spectrum, kind of a blackberry, black raspberry, a little bit of plum, a little bit of salty texture to it as well from those calcareous sedimentary soils. We do a fair amount of whole cluster fermentation every year. And in 2019, we did about 25%. We adjust the amount of whole cluster we do every vintage based on the vintage. Warmer vintages tend to get more because those wines are all about the fruit. The fruit is, we kind of want to temper the fruit a little bit because we like wines that are a balance between fruity and savory. We like the savory texture in the wine. We also like the tannin that the whole clusters can bring to the wine because of my restaurant background, I really want wines that fit the dinner table, something that has the tension and texture to really hold up to the proteins in a meal. And so that's what we're about. So in my glass, we have the 2019 Metaphor and Simile. I opened this wine yesterday. So I did that because I really wanted the wine to show. This has only been in the bottle for about 3 months. And these DM corks really hold the wine in a nice, pristine, fresh state. And so I really wanted the wine to give as much as possible today. So we opened it yesterday. And so I would recommend, and probably for everybody's wines, is cork these bottles again and try them tomorrow, because I think you're going to see an expansion of the wine from that extra time with air. But right away, it's a mix of red fruits, like red cherry, some barky spices, a little cinnamon, a little kind of dried tobacco leaf. Yeah, lots of spice. But the fruit becomes a little bit more dark as it lingers in the back palate. Pardon me. Yeah, as it goes across the palate, the tannins from the whole cluster really wrap around the whole palate rather than coming in on the finish. It's a fairly light-bodied wine. It's not super rich and intense, but it just carries and sings across the palate with a mix of red and black fruits. And again, that savory, barky spice and tobacco leaf across it. Yeah, I'm excited about putting this wine together and showing a larger Willamette Valley cuvee that shows the whole valley rather than just one single spot. And that's very apropos to my brand, which is just a lot of blends of different sites. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, John. And I want to mention, this is one of the only 3 20-case lots in the entire auction. So it's a real opportunity for somebody. Grochau Cellars. Thanks very much. Next, we have Steve Anderson of Eola Hills Wine Cellars, lot number 54. Easy does it. Go for it, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Pat. So you heard John talk about soils, or you may have heard that, at least I did, of each of his vineyard sites. And that is true, and that is key to all our vineyards. And everyone says, oh, we're a unique site, and that is true. And there are so many unique sites. So Eola Hills started as a vineyard in 1982. And in 1986, when the winery was founded, we were the 38th bonded winery in Oregon. Given that there's near 900 now, that boggles my mind that we got in early in 1986 as the 38th bonded winery with our vineyard that was planted in the Eola Amity Hills before it became an AVA. And because we've been around for so long, we kept our name, Eola Hills Wine Cellars. And typically, my style, it's balanced. You know, the wine has to have a wonderful aroma. It has to have a great taste, flavor, body, structure, finish. You know, I want it to be very well-rounded. Our higher end wines, I try to create some ageability for those people who like to cellar their wines. But if you think Eola Hills, it should be fruit and balance. And having said that, you don't always get that from one clone on one rootstock and one vineyard. Typically, they're blends from many different selections of Pinot Noir from many different vineyards. But our title for this wine, or our name for this wine, Easy Does It. As I'm tasting through the barrels, thinking about the auction, I came across this one barrel and go, wow, this has a nice aroma. It's got a wonderful flavor, texture, some bright acidity. For me and my vineyards 2019, if I had to pick out an issue was that the flavors and the sugars were coming up faster than the acids were coming out, given my site location. So this wine has some ageability because of its nice bright acidity, which you can feel on the palate. I agree with John. This is a wine that if you decanted it or if you opened it up the day before, it's going to just be a much better presentation for you doing that. So Easy Does It is a departure from what I typically do, blending wines, trying to create the best possible wine in each vintage. The more particulars is from our fossil block. For us, it's very unique. We call it fossil block because on the upper reaches of the Eola Amity Hills, it is that decomposed basalt, jori, Nikaya soils. But we have a spring on the property that over millennia, I assume, has washed out all of that volcanic soil and exposed the marine sedimentary layer on our property there. So if you go out and you look around after we've tilled, you find these sandstones, you crack them open, and they're loaded with clams and snails. And I even have one leaf. It looks like an elm leaf that one of our vineyard crew found. And that soil is so different. And we planted that vineyard on the same day, just 100 feet away, further up on the hill in the jori soils, same grade.
Steve, you're muted.
Got to mute my phone. And the fruit that comes off that is tremendously different. And so that's why I chose this barrel to bottle for this particular auction lot. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy some right now.
Great. Thanks, Steve. That's just a 5-case lot I forgot to mention. These are all 5-case lots except the one from Grochau, which is 20. So our next lot, 55, is from Sokol Blosser Winery. Alice and Sokol Blosser presenting Nifty 50.
Thanks, Pat. So Nifty 50 is named in honor of our 50th anniversary, which is this year. So we are really excited to have made it this far. I'm second generation and run the business with my brother Alex, who's our winemaker and is out camping somewhere with no cell phone service. See, in order to avoid Zoom, you have to like really go remote. Otherwise, with this work from home thing, you can always be found. So that's where he is right now. And our parents started in 1971, and we farm 88 certified organic acres in the Dundee Hills. And this Nifty 50 comes from our Blackberry block. So Blackberry was the first piece of property that we bought since the 70s and 80s. We purchased this property in 2008. That was right when Alex and I took over the business as co-presidents. And, there was quite a bit of discussion and tense discussion, I should say, and maybe disagreement over whether we should purchase this property because it was pretty much contiguous to our original estate in the Dundee Hills because it was so bloody expensive. And the prices that my parents paid back in the 70s and 80s, like $500 to $1,000 an acre, well, things are quite a bit more now. So there was not complete agreement, but we went ahead and we bought this Blackberry block. We're so happy that we did. And this is the first time that we produced an auction lot off it. We named it Blackberry block because when we bought it, it was covered in blackberries. It was a jungle of blackberries. It had not been farmed for a very long time. So we cleared the property. There's even a creek on the property. So we rehabilitated and restored that area as well. And we're really pleased with the fruit coming off of that section of our vineyard now. We've got 5 picking blocks, and so what we did was we took 1 row from each of those 5 blocks to produce this 5-case lot. So Nifty 50, 5 rows, 5 cases. It just seemed like the perfect coincidence. So this wine spent about 16 months in French oak. It was a once used barrel, and our goal with this is to really show off the terroir of the site. So you're going to get a lot of red fruit, which is very characteristic of the Dundee Hills. You're going to get some nice minerality, a bit of that toastiness from the oak, but fairly subtle, and you're still going to have a nice core of acidity and structure to hold that wine together and give it some nice ageability potential. So very excited to be sharing Nifty 50 with all of you today. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Allison. That's great. It's always good to hear the second generation is still experimenting and doing new things. Speaking from the older generation point of view, we'd love to see that. Life goes on and it's going to get more interesting as it goes along. Hooray for you guys. So now moving right along, lot 56. We have a real newcomer now. This is great. We have lot number 56. It's a 5-case lot. We have Bryan Laing of Hazelfern, new kid on the block. Tell us about it.
That's right. Thanks, Pat. That was Allison. That was the perfect segue coming from one of the OG people in the room. Now I get to be that new kid on the block, and so I'm Bryan with Hazelfern, co-founder, co-winemaker. This is our very first Willamette Valley auction, and we're very excited about it. We just to give you a little bit of history on Hazelfern and where we got started. I grew up in a family that just loves wine on the dinner table. And so like John mentioned earlier, food and wine is something that was just really important to us growing up. And so I graduated from college in 2003, moved up to the Portland area and was actually working for Nike and living with my aunt and uncle for my first summer. And they have this amazing wine cellar, and they have this amazing wine tasting group that's met every single month in Oregon here for over 40 years. And so they taste every single month, and it takes you back to some of those OG people that would attend that group. And so that's kind of how I started getting into wine, and that was in 2006. And coming out of that, a lot of the folks were like, hey, you guys are super into this. You should try making wine and we'll kind of help guide you. And so that's how we got our start. We started in 2006, literally in our basement in Northeast Portland, in a neighborhood that used to be called Hazelfern Farm back in the 1800s. It was a cattle farm on the northeast side of town. And so that's kind of where we got our start in that basement. You fast forward to 2014, I had a young cousin. She was 27 years old. Her name was Annie. She beat cancer at age 18. She was off pursuing her dreams in Hawaii because she understood that life is very, very short. She was working for an organic farm, and first day on the job, setting up at the farmer's market in Honolulu. She was in her tent in the middle of that farmer's market when a delivery truck drove through that market and drove through her tent and unfortunately killed her instantly. And we got that phone call while we were on a hike at Multnomah Falls, just east of Portland. My wife, Laura, and I went and sat down and had lunch right after that. And we said, life is so short. We've always talked about doing this thing one day. Let's literally go do it. And so we went back and sold everything in Portland and moved our life to Newberg, Oregon to pursue wine full-time and commercially. And so we landed here in Newberg because we still love Portland. We want to be on this side of the valley, close to Portland still for all those great restaurants. And we make our wine just up the street from the Allison, where we have a small vineyard here. And then now we have another vineyard out on the eastern side of the valley. And then outside of that, work with about 11 different vineyards across the valley. So 2014, that was our first commercial vintage, and have just kind of been slowly growing ever since and having a ton of fun. And that's really what I want to convey. We're here to have a lot of fun. And so with that, want to introduce our wine. We had a lot of fun in coming up with this wine. It's called New Kid on the Block. It's all about being born in the 1980s. So Laura and I were both born in the 80s, and the vineyard that this fruit comes from, Yamhill Springs Vineyard out in the Yamhill Carlton, was also planted in the 1980s. And so we just wanted to capture the energy of the 80s. Starting with the name of it, which is an old New Kids on the Block reference. And then if you see in the guide, the clone on this wine we listed as 8675309, which we had a lot of fun coming up with. And again, trying to have fun. And then I realized I actually started getting emails about it, and people said, "What is that clone? We've never heard of it. That sounds amazing." And so I had to explain that it's an old Tommy Two-Tone song. So I just wanted to call that out. The actual clone of the wine is 115 clone, again, planted in the 1980s. Yamhill Springs Vineyard is a vineyard that's way out on the northeast or the northwest corner of the Yamhill Carlton AVA, one of the furthest vineyards out in that AVA. High up, it's over 500 feet in elevation, which is pretty high for the Yamhill Carlton. Because of that, it's got this real unique mix of soils. It has predominantly Jory soil, but there's these big fingers of a soil called pea vine that come down through the vineyard, which is an old marine sedimentary soil that makes growing really tough. And if you were to look up pea vine with the Geological Society, they actually say it's not suitable for agriculture. So it is it really stresses those vines and makes very small clusters with a lot of intensity. And it's something that we kind of like really mixed with that Jory soil. So this wine right here, again, food and wine is everything. So this is has good acid to it. But one thing that's a little bit different is being this 115 clone. It's a little bit darker fruit than we normally see from that vineyard. Normally we're talking cherry to strawberry from Yamhill Springs. This definitely has a little bit more blue and black fruit mixed in it, and real savory tones as well, which we absolutely love. And then this wine is a blend of 3 vineyards, or 3 barrels that came from that vineyard in 2019, one of those being a new barrel. So it's 33% new oak. We barrel aged this for 15 months. And I say that because that's a little more new oak than we would typically use in a Hazelfern wine, a little bit more barrel aging than we would typically do. And again, these clusters from the 115 block were just so small that although we didn't see a lot of tannins in 2019, like intense tannins, this block definitely had it. And so we gave it that extra barrel time just to kind of level those out. So with that, hope everyone enjoys it. We're obsessed with it. This is New Kid on the Block, and be on the lookout for clone 8675309.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was one of the people that emailed him because I didn't get the reference. So that's great. Thanks a lot, Bryan. And it's so nice to have a new kid on the block. Always good for our whole industry. Now we have lot number 57. And this is Maggie Harrison from Antica, Terra, and she has a special story about how she chose her 5K slot. Thank you, Maggie. Take it away. You're on mute, Maggie.
I know. It's really loud in the winery. I'm sorry. Isn't that so nice when Pat introduced you? It's like being at show and tell in kindergarten again. Maggie has a special story she's going to share with you today. You're so nice to me. Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm from Antica Terra. And we can talk about the winery. I don't tell really short stories, so I'm going to tell you about the wine first. And then if Pat says I have time afterwards, then I can tell you about when Antica Terra started and all that kind of stuff. But look, I was not born in the 80s. I remember when 8675309 was actually a hit song, but also I haven't been here since the 70s. And so unlike Pat and Allison, who are carrying the legacy of their families, I'm not from here. Right. I came from Chicago. I started making wine in California, and I came here in 2006. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is really important, there's sort of, I think, two things that are most important for me, because the winemaking is the thing I love most of all, except for honestly, you know, if my wines are good, if they're actually good, we won't know until I'm long gone, until my kids are making the wine or your kids are making the wine or kids after that, right? Somebody's going to have to give me a very long 6-foot straw so that I can see 50 years from now if something that we did was actually worthwhile. But I think that the culture that we create in this building and the way that we raise people in this little business, that's really important. And then also the way we plant a vineyard, right? The vineyards last a really long time, as Pat and Allison can tell you. And so those decisions have long lives. And so when I got to Antica Terra, there's not a lot of information given to me about the vineyard, right? It was planted by two guys, and they sort of scraped together all of their money and they put some vines in the ground. When I got there, I had a ton of questions and they didn't have a lot of answers for me. And so I've been piecing together, sort of just gaining on intimacy with this place over time, which I think really is the most important work that I do. I have to, right? My kids right now, they're 11 and 13. They don't want to be winemakers, but somebody's going to come after me, and somebody's going to come after them, and somebody's going to come after them. And I think it's my job to write more of the story, to be able to tell more of the story of that place than was given to me. So when I was at the blending table in 2014, I was thinking about just this task, my life's work and understanding this place and getting better and better and better at growing things there. And I was realizing, you know, something that we all know from being at the blending table, however we make our wines, which is that tiny percentages of things make a massive difference, huge. Any of us could tell you, right? A 0.5% difference, a 2% difference makes a really wildly giant difference in the wine. And so I was thinking about how we take care of the barrels in the cellar. And like some of the people on the screen, I work with 9 different Pinot Noir vineyards, right? A bunch of different vineyards. And then in any given year, I have somewhere between, you know, 60 and 90 different picking lots. And those things are all kept maniacally separate through the whole of their lives in the winery. And so I don't have 90 different topping lots. I don't have, every barrel doesn't have its own little bottle next to it so that I can just top it with itself for the whole of its life. Like many of us, I break down one Pinot Noir barrel, and then we top all of the barrels with it until that barrel is gone. And then we select another barrel and we top every other barrel of Pinot Noir in the cellar. And so I was at the blending table thinking about this. And while I take such pride in sort of my deepening intimacy and deepening knowledge of the Antica Terra vineyard, it started to dawn on me that I'd actually never tasted a wine that was 100% from that vineyard, that was just purely from that site. Because, you know, over the life of a wine, our wines are typically in barrel about 16 to 18, 19 months. You know, it could be as much of 10% of that barrel is topping wine. And so in 2014, I started doing something really just so I could learn. And so when we go to the press with any fermenter from the Antica Terra vineyard, I choose twin barrels, meaning 2 barrels that are the same size, same age, same toast, same forest, same cooper. And then for the life of that wine, one of them I top normally, just as I do with everything else in the cellar. And the other one we top with rocks. So in 14, and I was thinking about this and I said, okay, well, how am I going to keep this wine pure? I can't just not top it. I mean, I could, but that wasn't the right answer for me. And so I went upstairs, it was during harvest, and I went upstairs to my computer and I started shopping for marbles in bulk. And you can buy a lot of marbles, and it's not very expensive, but marbles are not made out of the highest quality glass. And I was a little nervous that all of these, you know, these twirly colored marbles were gonna leach lead into my wine, and then it was not gonna be pleasant for anyone. So then I reached out to all these tank manufacturers and stainless steel manufacturers to see how much it would cost or what it would take to manufacture enough stainless steel spheres that I could drop into the barrels to displace the headspace, because completely not reactive. And I thought that would be the nicest thing for purity. But it turns out that once you figure out how many little stainless steel balls it's going to take, it was going to cost $54,000 just to top up a single barrel, which I don't even have $5.40. So that wasn't going to work either. And so then I said, okay, well, in Burgundy, right, back in the day, if somebody had a tiny parcel of Grand Cru, but it wasn't enough to fill a barrel, they would top their barrel with rocks because they didn't want to go top it with, Premier Cru or Village level wine. And so I said, oh, I'll just get rocks. And so I looked online, and in fact, you can buy big pallets of river rocks from Home Depot. And then I was about to honestly buy it. And then I was like, wait, that's so stupid. Why am I, the whole vineyard is planted on rocks? Why am I buying rocks? And so, much like Steve's vineyard, the rocks that come from the vineyard are these very, very, very compressed, ocean floor. They are this very compressed marine material. And when they're not like ripped, they're jagged when you break them. And I didn't want that much surface area of rocks in the barrels. And so we found a river, a little creek that is geologically similar to the Antica Terra vineyard, Alder Creek. And we go now. We harvest rocks, we take little clam buckets and we pick rocks out of the river, and then we top those barrels. So 1/2 of the twins from each of those twin lots, we top them over the life of their wine with rocks. And so certainly, right, it's not like the rocks aren't additive. It is not like stainless steel or glass. They are certainly bringing something to the wine, but it was the closest that I could get to the clearest sight line, to the clearest sort of angle through the lens of a pure expression from the Antica Terra vineyard. And so I didn't do this so that I could bottle a thing and call it Alder Creek. I did it so that I could learn. But when we started participating from the first auction, I wanted to see if there was a wine just out of these barrels that were topped with rocks that was whole and complete and beautiful on its own. And so this 5K slot is from a varying proportion from each of those barrels, and is to date the only pure expression from that vineyard. Good.
Good, great story. Thank you, Maggie. 5K slot, it's called Alder Creek, appropriately. Next we have lot number 59. It's another 5K slot from Alban, Debeaulieu of Abbott Claim Vineyard, and the lot is called Our Edges. So please, Alban, tell us that story.
Thank you, Pat. Hi, everyone. So yeah, Alban with Abbott Claim. The Abbott Claim name has been around for some time in the Willamette Valley now, about 20 years. In 2001, Ken Wright set out to plant a vineyard here on the Savannah Ridge, a low-rising ridge in the Yamal-Carlton AVA, tucked in between Carlton and Vandy Hills. And he planted this vineyard on top of the ridge there in 2001. In subsequent years, the owner of the winery, Anthony, planted the vineyard on contiguous property right here in 2006 and 2005 and 2006. And in 2012, he ended up purchasing Abbott Claim Vineyard from Ken. So now today, this is a 150-acre property with 44 acres of vines planted. All the 3 Pinot Noirs we produce yearly are strictly from the estate. And last year we just finished building a winery here in the trees on the feet of the hillside. And I've been making wines under the Abbott Claim label since 2018. So 2019 is our second vintage with Abbott Claim. We work very, very traditionally, nothing you haven't heard before. The vineyard has always been organically farmed, dry farms, no-till. So I would say that most of the energy, most of our time and call it intellect bandwidth we spend tends to go towards farming and trying to really tend to the vines and tend to their surroundings. And the way we work in the winery is just a way to try to transcribe those things as clearly and as transparently as possible into a bottle. So very traditional winemaking, picking grapes on freshness and very strictly native fermentations, delicate extractions, varying amount of whole clusters, a lot of lees in aging. The wines spend 16 months in a cold, moist and dark cellar down here on very heavy lees. And then in the case of 2019, go into bottled, in bottle, unfined and unfiltered. So the Pinot Noir we produce, we make 3 wines every year, and they all say something different about Abbott Claim vineyard. They all are a unique lens through which to look at the Abbott Claim terroir. So whether it's with emphasis on geology, of microclimates, or a little area of the vineyard that has something specific to say. And this 4th wine, Our Edges, is again another perspective on this place. It's maybe a more conceptual one, where this really this wine stems from an idea, from a concept. It's an ecological concept called ecotones. Sort of the term ecotones describes, or edges describes, the interface where contrasting biomes meet. And when we walk our vineyard and when we think about how to farm better and how to tend to this place, we tend to look at things that are around the vines, not the vines themselves so much. So to be a bit more clear about, descriptive about ecotones and what edges are, each biome, has its enclosed ecosystem with its own life forms and its balance and its nutrient cycling. But where biomes meet, where they overlap, that's where there's a measurable higher diversity of life forms and a higher density of nutrient exchange. So it's really being able to notice those places and being able to use them to really try to grow them and really tend to them is a big part of how we work in the vineyard. And so this little lot here is a blend of 2 specific blocks in the vineyard that are surrounded by everything but other vines. They really are surrounded by other other biomes, by other ecosystems that are overlapping with the vineyard system. So one of the 2 blocks, for example, is a block that we call Due North, which is the northernmost block on the vineyard, the very first vines that were planted here in 01. It happens to be the only block that's north facing, but it's also surrounded by trees on 3 of its sides, including it's budding against a very, very dense patch of Douglas firs. It's pitch black when you're walking in the day, even in midday in full summer. We have some Oregon white truffles growing there. There's a lot of cool air, moving through those trees and going through the vineyard and percolating through the vines. So you have this vineyard that's really informed by basically not vineyard ecosystem, but by others. You can also see there how the cover crop and the flowers are so much more diverse and the cover crop is so much richer. Even today, and after the heat waves we've had and the heat wave we're expecting, that we're going through right now, we still have green on the cover. We still have flowers. So you have little places like that, little nooks, little idiosyncrasies in the vineyard that are really informed by not so much a vineyard, but by other biomes. The other block that goes into this blend is on south facing, a little bit more central to the vineyard, on very shallow sandstone soil, ancient 50 million year old sandstone built on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Very characteristic of this area of Yamal Carlton. And that block, again, surrounded by trees on 2 sides. It's budding against a field of pollinator flowers. It's a mix of wildflowers to attract pollinators there, and also laying against a ravine, which is one of our main wildlife wildlife pathways. So very, very diverse bird life, and what have you, all the deer and coyotes and bobcats and so on. That's we live with around here. But so yeah, those 2 blocks bring their own. They bring so much of their surroundings. They bring so much of the identity of the nature that surrounds them, more than call it a strict expression of viticulture. That we thought it was worth making that point across. It's a concept that we use every day. I mean, again, as of yesterday, I was talking with Heath, a viticulturist, and I think we kind of opened a new door in our minds about how to really farm soil and cover crop and flowers. Really honing on the idea that even further than just farming vines, we need to farm what's the ground, the soil, what grows on it, what grows around everything. And I think kind of opening a few doors for us. And then for you guys who are tasting the wine right now, the northernmost block, is always the most delicate in frame and aroma of the fruit that comes off this vineyard. So always a very classic, very lithe expression of Abbott vineyard. While the second block a little down the hill is more of an expression of the geology, the warmth and the dryness of the vineyard. So a lot more concentration, a lot more tannin, a lot more structure. So for those of you who are tasting it, for me, this is not a wine that was made to be an objective expression of the highest quality that the wine we can produce here. It's really a wine that's meant to really express very specific parts of the vineyard. So you can really find at the same time the density, the high quality of tannin. I think that this one is expressing in 2019, and at the same time, kind of the lifted, lithe aromatic expression that we can find in the cooler areas of Abbott vineyard. But yeah, whoever ends up purchasing this lot should definitely lay down this bottle for a year. At least, we're still at least a year from releasing on 2019s, and these ones should be given time. But yeah, hopefully it's being enjoyed and understood and comes across well. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, just reach out anytime. I'd love to talk.
Thank you, Alban. It raises so many possible questions and interesting conversations. I really think it's great that you introduced a whole new concept here, and we can all play with that when we have time to talk. It's fascinating. But moving right along, because we must, next lot, and the final lot in this group 10 is lot number 60 from Domaine, Drouhin, Oregon, Rose Rock Vineyard, and it's Arron Bell presenting. Go for it, Arron.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I've had the pleasure of working with and for the Drouhin family for 20 years as Veronique Drouhin's assistant. Rose Rock, many people know Domaine Drouhin. We started in 1988 in the Dundee Hills, up above Irie Vineyard, next to Sokol, Blosser, neighbors. And believe in Oregon. Obviously, I've been here 33 years now. And in 2013, a property in the Eola Amity Hills was for sale. And we had been buying some fruit from that vineyard, which was the portion we were buying was called Popcorn. It was from the Rose Rock Vineyard. So when it went for sale, we all sat at the table and said, what is our next adventure in Oregon? We believe in it. We're here. And much like in Burgundy, we make wine from Von Romanet, we make wine from Louis Saint-Georges, from Gerbet Chambertin, different expressions of Pinot Noir in different places. And so the rest is kind of history. We purchased the property in December 17th, 2013. Our first vintage playing with Rose Rock fruit was 2014. We've been participating as Drouhin, Oregon, Rose Rock, and the auction ever since. So the vineyard is a 280 parcel acres vineyard. The vineyard is 122 acres. The actual acreage is 280 acres. It was homesteaded in 1852. So if you see it, our wine's called the DG. It's called the DG Cuvée, but it's, as I said when we did the practice session, it's actually not a cuvée, because cuvée would be a blend of maybe multiple barrels or different parcels. This is a single barrel from a single parcel. So it's actually the DG barrel of Rose Rock Pinot Noir from 2019. In a given vintage, we can make about 600 barrels of Pinot Noir from the Rose Rock Vineyard. That's broken down into 39 different blocks. We ferment all of them separately, barrel all of them separately, taste all of them separately. Don't top them separately, but it is all from Rose Rock. And we're getting to know each of the parcels. And that's the intention. We've always done this at Domaine Drouhin. But in the end, the wines that we make, the two Pinots that we produce commercially for Rose Rock, are going to be barrel blends from multiple of those blocks. So we found it interesting that what we do is, while we taste and taste all these parcels, is when we start to fine tune, our base blend is going to be about a 400 barrel blend from the property. And then our what we call the Zephyrine, which is a fragrant, beautiful rose. We didn't name it Rose Rock. It was already called Rose Rock. It's a beautiful name for the property, both kind of beautiful and powerful at the same time. But Zephyrine is our reserve. aspect from the property, kind of the best we thought we could produce. And once we decide that blend, we thought what would be fun for the auction is to choose our favorite single barrel from the Zephyrin to become the DG. Again, it says DG Cuvée on the bottle, but it is the DG barrel. I hope you enjoy it. I was interested in trying it last when we practiced. I hadn't tasted it, I didn't have it in front of me. I was on the car on the way to Bend. So I think my impression has completely changed on what my opinion was then versus now. So I find the wine to be very, very kind of crushed flowers, crushed kind of sour cherry aspect. Very, very pretty expression of Pinot Noir. You know, it doesn't quite have the power that in my mind I thought it did, at least when I bottled it. And I bought this, has been in bottle since January. I bottled it, so it's been in bottle for about 6.5, 7 months. But just a very, very pretty wine, beautiful, slightly spicy, texturally very pleasing. I think will age beautifully. But I popped it this morning. I wish I would have popped it yesterday, actually. But I popped it this morning, but just showing incredibly well. So I hope it's well received. I can't wait till next year, 2022, when we're doing this auction in person again, or I guess 2023, 2022, 2023, depends on who you talk to, but it'll be good to be in person, but I'm glad we're here doing this together. And I just hope the wine shows well, and thanks for your time.
Great. Look, we got through all 7 lots and we have a few minutes left. So for conversation questions, first of all, I'd like to say, do any of you folks have questions for each other or comments for each other before I launch into my own? Anybody? Julia, are you trying to say something? No.
I was not. I always have questions, especially
Okay.
for a group like this, but why don't you go to yours first?
Me first. Thank you. I love these stories. I've been able to moderate 3 panels, and it's just been a real eye-opener getting to know so many people that I didn't know before, but also to listen to the way you select your lot for the auction, because it's such an unusual thing to be able to do a unique 5-case lot. I mean, who gets to do that, right? It's a rare thing. And just hearing how people dive down and choose their lots has been really interesting. But now I want to just go zoom back out the other way for a minute, because, you know, this is about the Willamette Valley. It's the Willamette Pinot Noir auction, and it's to support the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, which we all believe is real important to our success as a wine region. And so, and we did just get this amazing news about being given the protected geographical indication status in the EU. So the Willamette Valley appellation is still a really meaningful thing. And it's so far out from the single 5 or 20 case lot you've made. I would love to hear some discussion about what you like to think the Willamette Valley is in terms of wine, style, character, personality, for the outside world that is only just beginning to know the Willamette Valley before they dive into the specifics that we're talking about. So I'd love to hear everybody's comments on that, but who would like to go first? I'm going to have to pick on somebody otherwise. Let's see, let's pick on not the oldest, not the newest. How about John? Because you made a Willamette Valley appellation.
I have to go first again.
Well, sure.
No, for me, you know, because I came into wine as an appreciator and a sales, for me, and well, it also speaks to the style of wines we endeavor to make, is it's a balance of fruit and earth. You know, it's not, you know, wine, of course, has to be fruity. It's fruit. It comes from fruit, but there's more tension in Willamette Valley wines. There's more earthy, mushroomy aromas than other New World wine regions, I find. I just find there's just, a coiled energy and a balance of fruit and earthy savoriness that really captures me. And that's where I am with it.
Great. Okay, good. How about Alban? Since you're from far away and you came to this valley as a you know, a newcomer, what do you think Willamette Valley means to the world outside or to you?
Yeah, I mean, I personally approach it with a lot of humility and just trying to learn all the time. So to give some perspective, when I started working with Abbott and I came to this vineyard the first time, the very first thing I did the first week I started the job was to dig just over 30 soil pits over the property to just really understand the terroir and the place and you know, this fundamental substance that we have to work with that really sets the glass ceiling. You know, just coming from, you know, say a place that cares a whole lot about the concept of terroir, it's still what informs my work. First and foremost, the way I work is not, you know, our wines are not winemaker wines. They're not wines of ego. They're really transparent wines of place, hopefully. So with that perspective, with that being said, I'm still learning the Willamette Valley. It's a big place that's very diverse. Not only a diversity of terroir, but also a diversity of perspectives and styles. So I think, you know, one out of two times you'll be tasting a wine that says something about terroir, or sometimes you'll be tasting a wine that says more about stylistic decisions and about the person who's making the wines. So as generations keep going by and people keep learning place and developing vineyards and the vineyards getting more mature, as people keep selecting the plant material that's being planted on those vineyards, which is only a vector for terroir expression, really, and also refining technique and making sure that farming technique and winemaking technique is in line with what terroir has to say. Then we will keep learning and you know, piece by piece, generation by generation, what the Willamette Valley terroir is. So from my short-term humble perspective, it's still hard for me. It's hard to give a definite answer. I think it's a diverse place with different terroirs and also different ideas and different styles. And so I think there's still time for people to refine technique and actions to make sure that they are transparent to place and say less about ego maybe or stylistic ideas. So yeah, I don't know if that was clear. I hope that wasn't offensive.
No,
and
that's
yeah,
good.
that's my.
Hey, Pat.
Yes, Steve.
So I'm kind of in the middle between John and Alban, a little bit more towards Alban, that I think from my perspective, when I hear other people talk terroir, they're talking about soil type and the growing conditions in the vineyard. But if it wasn't for man, for the human actually planting those vines in that location, I guess where I'm going with this is I think the human element of the winemaking is also part of the terroir. So, and I agree with Alban that it shouldn't necessarily be all about the ego. I like to let the fruit speak for itself. You know, I'm sampling the fruit that's being grown in the vineyard, and I'm making decisions about what yeast I want to use to maybe steer the direction of the wine. You know, am I doing punch downs? Am I doing whole cluster? Am I doing whole berry? Am I crushing the fruit? Temperature regimes, all of that. So I think the human impact is also part of the terroir, but you can also, as the human, overpower the terroir and ruin it. But I want people to know that the human element is just as important as the soil type and the clonal selection and the vineyard management practices. It's a 360-degree package. It just isn't 180 degrees of grape grown in the soil. The human impact and the barrels you choose and the length you age it and all of that has an impact to express terroir, because you can either bury it or you could bring it to the fore.
I have something to chime in as well.
Into Willamette Valley, it is diverse. I mean, we have many different soils. Just the Eola Amity Hills. We've got west-facing slopes. We got east-facing slopes because the hills run north and south. Yeah, we're trying to plant on the southern exposures, but there is a difference from the east and the west side of the Eola Hills, and it's just a 15-mile stretch of a hill. So super diverse.
Super diverse. It is that.
So working,
you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just working for the Drouhin family, you know, coming from the Burgundy perspective, I've heard this since I've first started working there. Oh, you guys are just making such a Burgundy style wine. And Vernig's answer for 20 years to whether it's a journalist or somebody in the tasting room or whatever it has been, is saying, no, that's not our point. Our point is to make the best Willamette Valley or Oregon wine we possibly can. Maybe the style happens to be the house style of Drouhin is Burgundy, I guess, but it's just something we always correct people. You know, it's it's Willamette Valley stands on its own, and we are proud of that. But it's just something we always sometimes have to correct people. Much less now, I think, as the Willamette Valley has become, a product of our own success as we become famous as a wine region, which I think we are. But it's interesting. But we always have to correct that. No, we're not trying to be Burgundy. We're trying to be Oregon, and I think it's an important point.
Great. Any other comments on the question of what does Willamette Valley mean to anybody?
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to add too, and I think you've heard it in all of these auction lots and in all of the ideas that you guys just gave, is just that we're a very young wine region still in the context of the history of wine, and just there's still that pioneering spirit here. I mean, we still have, Allison's here, second generation, like that's where we're at right now. And so with that, just the amount of innovation that happens here, and the amount of innovation I heard from all of you guys on your auction lots, and the ideas you're exploring from Rocks and Alder Creek, and I'm sitting here taking notes on, what if we tried this at this site, tried this at this site. And I mean, there's so much still to explore. And I'm so proud to be here in the Willamette Valley, and the quality that's coming out of the Willamette Valley, like across the board. Whenever I talk to winemakers here, everyone is very passionate about producing very high quality wines, and it starts there. And then what I love here is we don't have so many rules. We can kind of flex and explore, like how we bring those, those expressions, those wines, like using that human element, because we had this idea to go to a creek and get rocks, and that all exists here. And I think that's really, really exciting. I think the Willamette Valley is also a huge area, and there's so many areas that we have not explored. One of a vineyard I mentioned earlier that we have out on the eastern side of the valley is not near any other vineyards. It's 1,100 feet in elevation up in the Cascade Range, and we're completely obsessed with it. It's the old shoreline and where the Pacific Ocean fell up in the Cascades when it covered our valley, hundreds of million years ago. And that area is completely unexplored, and we're excited to be out there. But again, it's that pioneering spirit that allows us to go and do that, all with a focus on quality.
Great. Summing up.
Quickly add that the collaborative community spirit that has allowed this valley to really elevate not just single wineries, but other wineries sharing information and knowledge, and raising the boats, all wineries up. There's just a wonderful collaborative spirit. I know I wouldn't have been as successful as I have been without the help of many other people. And I think everybody here has had help from another winery, other winemakers with a broken piece of equipment, or with an issue they're having in the cellar or in the vineyard. I think that's a huge part of the Willamette Valley, and we wouldn't be where we were without that.
So true.
I'd love to just tie into what Aaron said a little bit more, where he said, Oregon is not Burgundy. That's totally true. We're also not California. And often people are trying to say, well, are you making more of a California style or more of a Burgundy style? And we're like, no, we are Oregon, and we are the Willamette Valley. And this is, we have such an amazing diversity of soil types, of clones, of farming methods, of winemaking styles, of microclimates, and all of that adds to what the particular vineyard and winemaker's philosopher is. And that creates, but everyone is united by this rising tide lifts all boats philosophy and the approach of quality. And we're going to all make the very best wines that represent our sites, wherever our sites are, whatever the soil types, whatever the clones are, whatever the farming practices. And we're going to continue to support each other and push the envelope in terms of quality and practices, to keep making amazing wine that people are going to come all over from across the world to enjoy.
Thank you, Allison. So Julia, because we have 1 minute left, are there any questions from the chat? I haven't been able to follow that.
No, not yet. I of course always have questions. They do tend to be big questions. So if you want, we can wrap it up now, or we can do one more.
Do you have one big question that everybody would love to talk about, and if we have time for it?
I would love to ask this group specifically, so let's say you're starting out harvest and you are interviewing your new group of interns for the year in a few weeks, and Allison, maybe it's front of house interns, maybe it's harvest, either way. And one of them is you from your very first year in the wine industry or your very first harvest. And you're surprised to see this, but you go with it and you just want to set them on the right path and teach them something that you think that the young you needs to know. What job do you give them for their first day?
Cleaning.
First, that's a terrifying thought to hire myself for my first day. I mean, wow. That's scary. I would increase the insurance policy and go with John's suggestion and lots of cleaning.
Here's a power washer. Get busy.
My first job was cleaning buckets that didn't get washed after picking. So they're dried sugary juice on buckets. So on a power washer in a vineyard on pallets. So that's what I would do.
I mean, we have this conversation. We have a long talk when people first start. And one of the things that we talk about is that it's about intimacy and that it's all in the details. And the more moments that we can be present and thoughtful and completely holy with whatever it is, with the vine in front of us, with the ferment in front of us, with the cluster in front of us, the more nuanced, graceful, and complex and meaningful that wine is going to be. And so I think it's exactly that. It's a really hard place to be because we're bringing in people to work for a season, and what they mostly do is really tedious work, right? They're either washing buckets or they have a pressure washer and they're washing everything in the cellar, or they're sorting for 22 hours straight, right? And sorting by scent like we do in the cellar. But we're also asking them to keep an intentionality that is super high. And so, what I would tell me, little me, and all the other people walking into the cellar is that thing, right? Like the intention that you bring, not how many minutes you do the pump over, not whether you use commercial yeast or whether it's native yeast, not whether you're going to use salt for a whole cluster. It's how you bring feeling into your work and how close you can stay to every decision and everything that you're doing, whether you're scrubbing a bucket or sorting fruit, makes its mark on the wine. And I think it's the most exciting thing when I'm able to share a bottle of wine with, a 13 with somebody who worked here in 13, and they see, right, when things happened in 13 and we did the work and they can see the result of that work, their personality and their intention and the work and every bucket they clean is imprinted on the wine. And I think it's the most exciting and most that right, without saying that a person is more important than soil, that emotional transparency, that's what I find, that's the part of wine that I fall in love with. And I think everyone that walks into the cellar, they mark the wines.
Great point, Maggie.
Thanks.
Pay attention, listen, and the devil's in the details. But it's a great.
You're like, I never want to work there. I'm not working.
No,
there. Nobody's ever going to come work
There's
for me.
intention in everything we do. That's why the quality is so high. That's true. I mean, that's true of all of us here. So that's right. We all do everything with intention, which is great.
But it's so romantic to go work harvest. Like, doesn't that just sound amazing? And doesn't it even sound even better to go pick grapes?
Ooh.
Harvest is the best. It's the best. I'll scrub buckets all day long. Love harvest.
To add on to what Maggie said, just that the attention to detail, we always have this conversation at the beginning of harvest because harvest is tough. It's physically hard. There's nights where we're out there at 3-4 a.m., after working for 2 months. And so when we go into it, we remind even ourselves, like we have to be prepared for that because there are no shortcuts. We do not take shortcuts. Like this only lasts for a certain time. And those details that is our opportunity to produce something that is amazing. And just by gutting through it at 3 a.m. and doubling down and focusing on that, knowing that we'll get to the other side of it, like that's the opportunity to do something great. And that's something that we remind ourselves every harvest going in, because it's going to get dicey at the end, and you want to just go to bed. And in that moment, we can't do that. We got to focus and pay attention.
And it's the wines in front of us.
Yeah, and I'll get the last word in, I assume here, not to belabor the point, but I tell people that, it only takes one bacteria to make a billion. So, clean, clean, clean. If you're not cleaning a bucket, clean a hose. If you're not cleaning a hose, clean a tank. If you see some grapes on the floor, pick them up. And I agree with Bryan. What I was going to say is, it's you're 3-4 weeks in, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the mornings, something broke down earlier in the day. You're still processing fruit. It's raining out. You are wet. You are cold. You get one shot. So, you're there until it's done. And then you show back up the next morning and do it again. And when it's all said and done, you have a lovely bottle of wine. So it's not romantic. It is work, but the result is wonderful and magic.
Yeah, there are sometimes at those times when it's like 3 a.m. and in a cold vintage where it's freezing cold out there and it's just pouring rain and you're wearing the full like wetsuit. Like oftentimes I'll just look at Laura and be like, dude, I don't know who has a more challenging like us or a deadliest catch right now. Like I feel like a crab fisherman like in Alaska. I know it's not that bad, but sometimes you feel like it.
Yeah, but everybody wants to come and do it.
Oh yeah. That's the thing. You still love it, but in that moment, you're just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's my favorite time of the year.
It's the whole year. It's everything. So, Julie, I hope that answered your question.
That was great. Thank you. And I have to agree. I wish I could keep working harvests forever. Harvest was always my favorite. And the ones I've worked have been pretty spectacular. I'm grateful to the people who let me do it.
Well, we'll have another one this year. And not too long from now, from the looks of things. So that's exciting too. So I guess we should wrap it up. We're going just a tad over, but that's okay. Julia said we could. And now I'm going to say thank you to all our panelists. And thank you to all of you out there who we can't see, but we're so glad you joined us today. And hope you get a chance. If you're coming in person, that'll be exciting. You can taste all these lots. But we hope to see you in Oregon one of these days if you're not here right now. And thank you very much for coming to our auction preview week.
I would say come and work harvest. I still need some Cellarettes.
Oh, be careful what you ask for. Okay, thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Pat.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
panelists.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Enjoy summer.
Cheers.